did, or at least one person, I think Lisa, mentioned to me that she was having an issue finding like where her particular lesson had a quiz, and since I didn't know if all of them did have a quiz, you might just send a note and let us know what you took,
Mm-hmm.
just to satisfy the curiosity there as far as what you did.
Yeah, if you chose something that didn't have a quiz, and I didn't see any that were there, but I certainly did not go through all of them. So if you grab something that didn't seem to have a quiz, then please just let us know which one you took and we'll give you credit.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think that was a pretty good resource. Obviously, those people have a lot of experience creating those types of lessons. I know that the ladies in Pacer, I think it was Janice that said, what she liked about it is it really made her do actual hands-on work. And anytime we can add that to this tech labs, I think will be a benefit as we can evolve this and refine it as a resource. So anyways, that's pretty much all I have about past weeks. So, and you're probably already recording, so
I am.
Go ahead and plan on getting that up as soon as possible for those of the class who couldn't make it. Also, there might be some things in this particular class that it might be better to go back over the recording if you find something you like. I did not make slides for this, so I'll try to type in addresses, or Robin, if you see it, you might type it in if you're familiar with it, just in the chat so they can see that. So anyways, this week we're talking about being a Windows power user, and that could probably mean a few different things to different people. And really, the idea of this module is just trying to be efficient Windows users. So anything you can do to make your life on a Windows machine better is kind of the aim of this particular week. So I think I'll just go through the course objectives real fast. I'm pulling up class.nichols.org over on my other computer. I have to sit on my Windows laptop this week instead of the Mac, because we're talking about Windows. So the first objective is, given the Windows OS, the learner will adopt keyboard shortcuts. So the objective here is, if you can find a couple of shortcuts that we talk about today that can help you with your workflow, then that would be part of objective 1. There are a lot of shortcuts out there, and I certainly won't bore you with them all. I'll try to say this a few times today. If you have a personal workflow and we don't cover necessarily a keyboard shortcut, know that there might be one that might help you with tasks that you do. It really just depends on what you work on day to day, so it's kind of difficult. Yes, so then Robin did throw the big Wikipedia keyboard shortcuts. There are a bunch. If you were to Google keyboard shortcuts, you're going to see some that just apply to Office, just Word. Some of them are a little bit more about the operating system. Objective 2. Learner will be able to use common administrative tools. So we will go over some tools that are built into Windows. That's one of the PDFs that's included. We'll also talk a little bit about how to get to those tools. They're sometimes a little bit hidden, and you might not run across them unless you knew exactly where to go for that. Finally, we're going to do a little bit of a troubleshooting part of that, and that kind of feeds into the third-party tools and a little bit of the built-in Windows tools, just to get a little bit of an idea of how you might try to deal with some definite operating system issues. I know Module 1, we talked a little bit about a troubleshooting process in general. So here, this week, maybe we'll just throw a few tools at you that might be helpful dealing with certain situations where we're pretty certain it's the operating system that's messing up, not your hard drive, not RAM. And sometimes it takes a bit to get to that point to make sure that it is the operating system. So, starting from the top, why keyboard shortcuts? I have a document that I included here. I think I ripped it off a little bit, maybe add a little bit. So maybe the first reason would be efficiency. Switching between keyboard and mouse can kind of slow you down at times. So that's why a lot of professionals try to keep their hands on the keyboard and use keyboard shortcuts as much as possible. Let's see, with the part of that, yeah, like for example, if it's much easier to select all the text or all the files inside a folder by hitting Control and A, and that'll select everything. If you're a mouse user, you're probably used to dragging at the top of the screen and then dragging over the entire screen. If your screen is scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, then that can take a long time. Control-A does it pretty fast. Also, I know when you're moving, like let's say I want to move all of the files from a folder over. I remember before I knew about Select All, I would be really conscious about knowing that I got every file, and then wondering how many files are in the old folder and how many are in the old one, and maybe counting them like, okay, I have 16 files. Well, you hit Control-A, and you know that you have every bit of data inside that folder. And then if you do, Control-C, we copied it, everything in that file, and then Control-V, we're pasting it in somewhere new. So, and doing all that without having to touch the mouse at all, which is a little bit slower. Multitasking. So when you don't have to follow the pointer around to see what you're doing. You're basically kind of in control. You're confident that what you're clicking on with the keyboard is doing the steps that you want. So rather than kind of following along behind the cursor. Complementary, you can use a lot of tasks between the keyboard and mouse. So if you know how to use them, you might come up with a faster way. For example, on this is if we're tabbing between the fields inside a, kind of like we did in module 2, I guess, with the browser. Looks like Robin's on the call. So there's definitely ways to complement the use of the keyboard and mouse. Health issues. I don't know if you guys have ever sat at your computer all day and been scrolling and scrolling, and it feels like your finger is aching at the end of the day. It's another good reason to try to use the keyboard and actually switch it up back and forth throughout the day. Finally, precision. You can be a lot more precise with a keyboard. A lot of people that do a lot of text editing find that just using all the keyboard shortcuts is really going to help them be precise in their actions. Again, that kind of fits in with the Control-A for selecting all. We're very precise, rather dragging and dropping, or highlighting rather. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorite, everybody's got favorite keyboard shortcuts, especially tech people. So number 1 on the list, just to give you an idea, everybody knows what the Windows key on the keyboard is, if I said that. If you don't, look down at your standard Windows keyboard and look between the Control and the Alt, and you'll see the Windows key. So that is one key that can be used as a hotkey with other keys. When Windows 8 first came out, you might remember that the big Start menu started taking over. It had all of the apps on it. And then we also had issues where maybe it took us to an app with PDF. The Windows key and the D key take you back to the desktop. I'm going to mute somebody. Hold on a second. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So the Windows key and D can be very helpful. Somebody's unmuted again. I think they're trying to troubleshoot the connection over at Carbondale. Okay. So Windows key and D. Another good example is the Windows and Tab. If you ever try to hit Windows key and Tab at the same time, you'll see that all of your open windows will do a nice little 3-dimensional lining up as long as you're on the modern operating system. If you tab through those, you can see all your windows that are open. Adding the Shift key allows you to go through that stack of applications backwards. If you're not familiar with the keys inside Office for making text bold or underlined or italics, make sure that you're aware that you can hit Control-B for bold, Control-U for underline, and Control-I for italics. So again, with precision, much easier to jump into that and doing it rather than highlighting text and then going up to the menu and hitting the B. So if you're a person who uses a Word product or an Office product a lot, it might be a good idea for you to learn the shortcuts that work with that. Now, if you're never typing up documents, then perhaps those aren't keys you're really too worried about. Let's see. I have a few Office must-haves for keyboard shortcuts that we didn't talk about before. One of them is copying the formatting. So I know, for example, if you're working on a resume and you've changed your typeset font, or maybe you have your headers a certain way, a really easy way to go back and, sorry, I didn't change my screen. There we go. An easy way to go back through it is to hit Shift F3 to, I'm sorry, copy, Control Shift C to copy formatting, and then to apply that formatting over body of text you already have is to hit Control Shift V. That'll take your formatting that you like and apply it to text without overwriting it. Again, what I was about to say was if you have a line of text where you decide you're going to capitalize everything, or you want to make it all lowercase, or maybe you just want to change that the first letter of every word in the sentence is now capitalized, you can highlight the text and hit Shift F3, and that's going to toggle through different capitalization for your text. So just a couple of Office must-haves. I want to talk a little bit about F2 and F5, the top of your keyboard. So we've talked about in staff technology competencies that we'd like people to be able to rename files, which isn't necessarily the most difficult of tasks. You can right-click it and choose rename. You can also highlight it and choose F2, and that's going to allow you to rename it. It's a little bit faster. Another example of an F key that can speed things up is the F5 key. So we know that if we want to refresh a web page, we can go to the refresh part of the browser, the little circle. Also, you can tap F5 and refresh the website over and over again. This can be really handy if you're ever on a site that has live updates, something like sports scores or a play-by-play of a game. You hit F5, and rather than waiting for the browser to automatically refresh, you're forcing it to. I just want to talk a little bit about the run box. Is everybody here familiar with the run box? Let's do a little raise hands, little interaction, please. Have we used a run box before? Are you familiar with what I mean by it? Got Robin and Jack. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just make sure that we're on the same page here. So, to open a run box, you're going to go back to that Windows key that I just mentioned, and you're going to tap that and R for run. And as you can see, I brought up a little bit of a run box here. This allows me to enter commands and hit enter. The reason why this is somewhat important is because I might step into a computer environment, especially as a tech person, where I haven't set up all of the start menu items. So let's look here. Let's say I wanted Microsoft Paint, but I don't see it in my program. So normally what we probably do is we look through our programs and we try to find it. Where is Paint? Oh, I can't find it. I can't find it. And then here it is under accessories, and we finally get it. Now I could also type it in here in this search box, which is basically just another run box right here, but it also does searching. But an easy way to do it, if I don't know anything about this computer, I know a Windows machine pretty much as going back to the end of time. If I open the run box and type in MS Paint and hit enter, I'm going to bring up Microsoft Paint. It's also very quick that way, rather than opening the start menu and looking through to find that program. So MS Paint is a good example. Another one is Notepad. If I need to leave a quick note or copy some text into something and then save it for later, it's a really fast way to get that interface open. We're going to talk about command line in a moment. So command line would be a terminal, or sometimes called the shell. If I type in CMD for command, I'm now going to have a terminal. I can enter more commands into here just like I did the run box, or I can do some networking tools, variety of working with directories, renaming files. It is an advanced interface, but there are a lot of reasons why we still have this post-DOS world. Command line, especially for the next week's module, could be important. We're going to talk things about connecting other servers from a distance and checking connectivity. So do want you to be aware of this is how you would get to the command line.
Dan, how do you bring the run box up again? Can you go over that one more time?
Sure. One more time. The easiest thing to do, because we know it's going to work no matter what, is to hit the Windows key. Again, that's the key on your keyboard between Control and Alt and R at the same time. And that's going to bring up the run box for you. There we can type in a lot of different things as we've talked about so far. MS Paint, Notepad. If I didn't have a link for Firefox on my desktop, I could certainly type Firefox, and that'll bring that up. Not every command is going to be so simple, so sometimes you have to look it up. That's why some of the PDFs that I've included have the different run codes, if you will, for programs. Let's see. Okay, control panel. A control panel is a pretty necessary place on the computer, and usually it's right here in the start menu. But we always, here at Nichols, we tend to hide that on patron machines. So if you went to a patron machine or trying to get control panel, it might be kind of difficult to find it. But we do know that we can always just type control into the run box and hit enter. And that's going to get us to this place that you've probably seen before. You might be used to seeing it with icons instead of, or by category. But this is a good starting place for troubleshooting and getting to different system settings. So again, control will get you there without having to dig for it. If it wasn't in this part here on the start menu, which is easy to have it removed, it can be kind of difficult to find it. Now again, we can use on modern Windows, we can use this little search area down here to get us to a lot of the same places. But that's a newer feature of newer Windows operating systems. So you're more than welcome to use that, but just know that actual commands, so if we had something a little bit more complex, I can run it in a run box just like I would like the command line, and they're pretty much the exact same thing. So run box and command line are really the exact same technology here. The main difference is, we'll show you a network one real fast. This will be from next week. If I type in ipconfig to find out my IP addresses, let's see what happens when I type it in the run box. It all happened, but it was just super fast. So certain commands you want to actually type in to the terminal or command prompt so that the information will stay for later. So this will be for next week more, but just to get you familiar with the concepts. Basically, a run box is just the command line. Do we have any questions about that part before we get into command line? Gotta get myself back into scene. There we go. Okay. Looks like Robin got that taken care of. Are we on time? 2:20. Okay, so just a little bit more about command line. So if I talk about the CLI or the command line interface or the terminal or the shell, this is what we're talking about, this window here. An operating system can be controlled via the command line or by what you all are probably much more familiar with, called the GUI. That's the graphical user interface. We call it GUI for short. So to look at files on the C drive in the operating system's GUI, or graphical user interface, we'd use Windows Explorer. And it gives us a nice representation of all of our directories right here. To see the same thing in the command line, I would type in C. Let's go up. Type in directory. So here we see the exact same information. There's the Dell folder, there's the drivers folder. So this is just a different way of controlling the operating system. That's what we're doing with command line. Again, this will come up more next week when we start talking about network tools. That's why we just want you to know a little bit about it. Command line, the final thing I'll say about it as far as being a power user is that it allows us to do some things with the operating system that we can't do with the GUI. And by that, I mean schedule various batch files to run. I'm going to give you an example of a batch file right now. So I think most of you have probably heard of Ninite. And this is some software we use to update common software like Adobe Reader, Flash, Firefox. So we just want to make sure that that software stays up to date, especially when we have deep freeze computers. If we try to update that software during the day, it's going to be forgotten as soon as we reboot the computer. So we might run something like Ninite after hours when the computers are thawed. But how do we make that run when we're away from the computer? That's where a batch file comes in. This BAT file right here is an example of a batch file. If I were to double click it, it's going to run a command, which is to run Ninite in the background. But we can also see what's in it, because really all a batch file is a series of instructions for a computer, and it's in a text document. So if I edit it, it's going to bring it up in Notepad for this computer. So we can see what this batch file does is it says Ninite exe, that's this piece of software right here, and it has a couple of switches. So switches, like that switch and this switch, are basically add-ons to the software. We can manipulate the way the software runs. So if I were to use the graphic user interface that we were just talking about, my only real solution, the only thing I could do is just double click this Ninite exe, and it would run, it would bring up this user account control. However, if I were to run this batch file, it's not only going to run the exe, but it's going to say run Ninite, but also from now on, disable auto updates. And that should make it so Java no longer pops up those little annoying messages that says it needs to be updated. Same thing with Adobe Reader and Flash. The other switch that's added is it says disable shortcuts. So that means when we run this batch file, it runs Ninite, but it's not going to put shortcuts all over our desktop, at least any more than we already have. So that's the reason we run it with that switch. So that's what a batch file is. If you see I run it, and it's going to start the software just like the other one, but with those two switches. Now what I can do with the batch file is I can schedule it to run. Oh, my computer went to sleep. I can schedule with Task Scheduler, which we can talk about later, to run the batch file. So I just want you to be familiar that that's going on the back. You could create your own batch file if you wanted. It's really just a notepad, a text edit. So it could happen with any kind of software, and it might have its own switches to run with it. So the main thing is we're creating a code here that we can schedule at a later time. So that's where command line really comes into being a power user, because it allows things like the batch files to be created. Finally, the last thing I'm going to say about command line is that there are times when we have issues with files or folders. Maybe the software doesn't want to run. It says you don't have administrator rights, or you try to delete something and it says you can't do it. A lot of times, if we go and find command line from accessories, and I right-click it and say run as an administrator, then anything I do inside this command line basically has elevated privileges that I might not usually have, even if my user account was an administrator. So if I have a pesky file or folder that I'm just never able to delete, you might be able to go into this command prompt, and you'd have to learn how to navigate it, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing. We're doing CD for change directory. I don't expect you to know any of this. But I would have a way to delete a file from this command line because it has elevated privileges that otherwise I would not be able to get rid of. Okay? So that's all I have about keyboard shortcuts and about using the terminal, at least until next week. Moving on to the next part here in a moment, but I just want to make sure that that's pretty clear. I know the terminal is scary. Command line is not something everybody needs to use. But again, next week we will be talking about it more for some network tools that are only available from command line. Okay, I think we can move on. Let me make sure. Yeah, we're definitely ready to move on if you all are. So this next section is kind of more about troubleshooting your Windows machine. There's the first piece of software I want to talk about, and this is where the third-party tools and the other handout with Windows tools might come in handy. There's way too many of them on there to talk about, so we're really just going to talk about some of the ones I find are the most important. So the first one we're going to talk about is blue screen view. Are people here familiar with what a blue screen is? I would think most of us are. Blue screen of death, or BSOD. That's when a computer has a fatal system error, and we call it a blue screen because in Windows, at least forever and ever, it's shot up a blue screen and it has some message about the error, and then that either stays on the screen until you reboot, or that only flashes for a second and you can't even read it because your computer did just suffer a crash. So we have one really good tool to deal. It's a free tool. If you believe your computer had a blue screen, then you could, oh, I better share it. Share my screen, 1 second.
Dan, we can't hear you anymore as soon as you started sharing the screen.
Probably a bad click.
Ah, there we go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, very good. All right, so blue screen view. The idea of the software is to read the messages from a blue screen and show it to give you an idea of what caused the problem. So when I open up blue screen view, if my computer has what we call a mini dump, which is from a blue screen, a log of a blue screen, then it's going to have a couple entries here. I don't have to actually do anything to find this. So let's click on one of these to see what that blue screen was all about. So what it's telling me is at 8:40 a.m. on the 24th, what caused my crash was a driver power state failure. The file description was the NT kernel and system. So if you're familiar, that NT is referring to Windows. If you remember Windows NT from the 90s, that was the enterprise version of Microsoft Windows. And so it's the kernel being basically the heart of the operating system. So we know that we had a driver power state failure with a pretty major part of the operating system. And at this point, I would probably do a little research about when you have issues with the NTOS kernel.exe and a driver power state failure. So I've never run into that issue before, so I need to do a little research. I did a little research on this the other day while I was getting prepared, and I saw that it points to a system driver problem. The research that I did shows that it might be a wireless driver or even a power management issue with the BIOS. So a couple of recommendations about this particular blue screen was, first of all, update your drivers. You can do that from the device manager. And then also, you might want to update your BIOS. I'm probably not going to get into what that takes, but at least we kind of have an idea of where we would go from there. A lot of times when we have these issues, it really becomes a mystery, and it'll continue to happen until you do something about it. So updating drivers can be a pretty simple process most of the time, unless you're not finding any drivers and you need to go to your manufacturer's web page. That can be a little bit more problematic if you're not familiar with it. But overall, to see the drivers, because I don't think we've ever covered it, I can go to Computer. If I right-click it, I can choose Properties. And I'm just showing you one of many different ways to get there. There's also a Runbox way to get to Device Manager. But here we are. So if I wanted to update the driver, the first thing I would try, and let's say we said it was a wireless issue. So here's my Intel wireless N. What I would want to do for my first step of troubleshooting is to update that driver's software and search automatically. It might not find anything. If it doesn't, then that's when I need to start other tasks, or maybe I need to call my tech person. If this was your home computer, at least you have an idea of where to look for help on that. So that's what the blue screen view. And so it says the best driver software is already installed. At this point, I might want to go to the Dell website and look up this laptop, which is a Vostro 3515, I think. So I want to look that up and see what wireless adapters or drivers there might be available for my machine at that point. So that's blue screen view. Again, it's just reading files that were created in the Windows mini dump folder. That's where those types of things end up after we have a crash. Okay. Next tool. I want to talk about Event Viewer. So if I haven't had a crash, but I do know that my computer did something weird, or maybe it restarted and it didn't create a mini dump, so I'm still at a loss. Where do I go to find out what's wrong with my computer? Event Viewer is your tool for that. So this brings up the run box here. I want to go to Event Viewer. Go to EVENT, VWR, enter. See what the chat. The mini dump, Kayla, is just what we call the log file. It's what Windows calls the log file from a blue screen. So it always ends up in the mini dump folder. It's not so much that you need to go and find it there, but Blue Screen Viewer, the software, what it does is it looks for a log inside the mini dump folder. So the dump would be where a log goes. And so it's just a small area for a log to be created. It doesn't have a lot of information. It just has a time stamped, what driver failed, that type of thing. Okay, so Event Viewer. Again, this is a good example of a tool that can be very difficult to find if you don't just get it from the run box. Let's see, would it be under accessories? It might be under administrative. It might be under control panel. All I can tell you is that if I go to EVENT VWR, and this is a pretty common one to have, then I know it's going to get me there every time. Event Viewer, okay. So this is what we see in Event Viewer. There's some custom views and Windows logs. What we're really looking for is under the Windows logs. And there's really two different areas I'm really going to look at here. Although there's 5 options, it's really system and application. So if my computer restarted, what I might want to do is click on System, and you're going to see a bunch of timestamp information. And most of this is completely legit things that happen. So I don't really want to go through that. I want to filter my current log over here on the right side. And from here, I'm just going to click on Critical, Errors, and Warnings. And this is going to filter me down, and probably not even warnings. It's really critical and errors. So here I can see a bunch of things that are happening. And all this is really doing is giving me more places to look. I was calling this section, we're looking for clues. So we know what time our computer restarted. That's when I can start going through my different events to see what might have happened around that same time. We're just looking to see if it points towards a piece of hardware, towards a driver, because right now we're just kind of grasping at straws right away. We don't know what caused that type of issue with the computer. Now, if your problem that you're looking for, or the reason that variety of the Event Viewer had more to do with software and not the operating system, then you'd want to go to this other log, this application. Again, probably want to go ahead and just filter it down. If you know what time it was, like in the last hour, you can filter that. Or again, the criticals and the errors. Let's see what this machine is pulling up.
While you're looking, there's another question asking you what a mini dump is.
Yeah, that's what I was just answering for a moment ago. Kayla, did that answer your question about the mini dump? I'll look.
Sorry, I was paying attention to the chat and not what you were saying.
Okay, yes, okay. You got it. Okay, so there's nothing really incredibly wrong with this computer. I mean, you can see it has a bunch of errors, so that's not uncommon. What what we're really trying to see is which ones are preventing us from doing our job. So there's a lot of things that go wrong you can see on your computer. It doesn't necessarily always mean that you know it is happening. So just keep in mind all the times that your computer is able to pull out of a bad situation without shutting down the computer. So you can see I've been having some power issues. And I'm not sure if that's because my computer ran out of battery and it just crashed on me because of that. If I kept on having issues, if like, for example, my laptop crashed in the middle of this meeting, well, I'd have a really good example for going into this event viewer. Okay. Any questions about event viewer? I really just want you to know how to get there, have an idea of what you're looking at as far as system and application. This is just a place to go to find information about your machine. Okay, going to get out of event viewer. I think probably almost everybody is familiar with Task Manager, although they might not be completely familiar with all the different things Task Manager does. First of all, there is a run box shortcut for Task Manager, although it is so easy to get to Task Manager because you can just right-click down here and start it. So you could also do the run box. A lot of people hit Control-Alt-Delete, especially if your computer is not responding. Remember, Control-Alt-Delete is an actual interrupt to the system, so it'll try to stop any hung-up computer. So that's why we might use Control-Alt-Delete to get the Task Manager. But there's really no need to. If your computer is working fine, you can just start Task Manager. So what are a few things I might want to do with Task Manager? The first one that pops in my head that I see a lot is what happens when you're working, sorry, this is for those of you who work with circulation. What happens when you're working with Koha and then Firefox Portable crashes and you try to reopen it? You click on the desktop here. I don't have a Koha Firefox. I try to double click it and you get that message that says Firefox is already running. And every time you do it, it says that same message. I've heard of people restarting their computer at that time, but what I'm just trying to tell you is that it's not necessary just to stop a process. So we opened up Task Manager. The first thing I could try to do if I had a piece of software here, let's open something. I'll do this. Atom, this text editor. Should open faster than other pieces of software, we'll see. Okay, so you can see Atom just popped up as an application that's running. Let's say that Atom was hung up and I wanted to end it. I could try that from here under applications. Now sometimes that's not going to work. So what I really need to do is to go to processes. If I can't kill a piece of software from applications, I will give you a 99.9% guarantee that you'll be able to stop it from processes. Now it's a little bit more difficult to find it because there's a lot more processes running, but I see it right here. I wouldn't want to close Zoom right now. That would be a bad idea, but I could kill Atom. And next one I kill is going to make that background go away. There we go. So I could do the same thing with Firefox before I try to restart the computer or do other things. I would find Firefox in this list here of processes, and then I would end it. That would free it up so I could restart it. So that's why I think the most important thing, if you got it out of today, would be let's use that Task Manager to kill processes that are hanging you up rather than having to reboot the machine. Rebooting could cause all kinds of stalls in your day. If the Windows update was trying to run and you had to reboot it might try to update your computer right when you were trying to do circ. So there's a lot of reasons not to reboot your computer when you weren't meaning to. Next part about Task Manager. So I can see on this computer I have 74 processes running. What if my computer was not performing really well? Well, I might want to see if I need to have so many processes running. I could just kill them now, like I did earlier, But I also might want to see about making it so that these processes never run at all. Many of these are completely necessary, or they're temporary, like the Zoom one's going to go away when I'm done talking about, when we're done with our Zoom session. So I want you to know about another command you can type in to the run box, and it's msconfig Microsoft configuration, and then we'll hit OK. So this is going to tell us, or be a place to look for startup programs. And I left a couple of them in here because I want to kill them. I don't want them. Every time I boot my computer up, on top of all the other things that run, here's a list of some additional items that run. A lot of times these are kind of extras. So for example, PC Meter Connect. That might be a piece of software I don't need to run at every startup because it's something I only use very rarely. I'll be happy to start it up when I need it. So I'm going to deselect it. Chromium is a browser, and after I installed it, for whatever reason, it made itself so that it would start the browser every time the computer comes on. Well, I don't want to use Chromium, especially every time the computer restarts, so I'm going to deselect that. And I'm going to click Apply. It's going to say, you have to restart or exit with restart. We're just going to exit without restart. Then, from now on, when I reboot this computer, those two programs are going to stop loading at every boot. That's going to cut down on boot time, which will be nice. Now, what if there was a program running, and I always see it in my notification every time I boot, and I hate this program, and I can't get it from msconfig, how do I get rid of it? Let's put in another command. You could get to add remove programs from the control panel, or you can type in appwiz.cpl. You do this stuff a lot, and it becomes really handy to memorize these. So these are my programs. Again, it's the same as going to control panel and going to programs. I just went to appwiz.cpl, control panel. So this is the other place that you might kill off a program from starting. However, what we're doing here is completely removing it from the machine. So if you've never removed a program from your machine before, this is where you do it. I can't say in particular what programs you might want to get rid of, but I just know a lot of people have never had an opportunity to remove a program. So if you see processes running, also if you had some virusy software or just some malware, you might have to remove it from here. You'd also have seen it running as a process in Task Manager. If I have a high performance machine, I'm going to try to run down as many processes as possible. The fewer, the better. I do want to mention another piece of software that goes along with Task Manager, and that is this guy here I've already installed. This is called Process Explorer. It's an add-on. It's a third-party Microsoft tool. And what it allows us to do is basically the exact same thing as Task Manager. These are the same processes running on the left-hand column that we saw in Task Manager. The main difference is if you were dealing with a computer a lot and you weren't really familiar, but you knew you didn't want all 125 processes running, and you tried to kill them from msconfig, and you tried to remove them, well, then you might want to try something like this Process Explorer. And it'll allow you to go through and see all the processes, and it gives you a lot more information about what you're looking for. So I just want to mention that Task Manager doesn't give you a whole lot of information. A nice thing that this also does is I can right-click it, and I can choose Search Online, and it's going to tell me what framework.exec is, at least take me to a Google search for that. So it gives you an idea, especially if you're trying to track down a virus and you saw something here very strange. Usually if it says something like Intel or host for Microsoft, we know it's pretty legit. But we might find something here that we think is a little weird. We might want to go ahead and search online, find out what it is, and if we have to, we'll look into removing it. So that's Task Managers and its equivalent Process Explorer. Although, let me close some of this out. That's not all Task Manager does. So what about performance? Some another important part. We had this problem with an Envisionware console recently where the computer would run and run and run, and it just seemed like the RAM just kept on taking up more and more and more RAM until basically the computer could stop. So this is a good place to go to see how your CPU is holding up and how your memory is holding up. It might give you an idea if you need to upgrade your RAM. If I only had 2 gigs of RAM on this laptop, you can see I'm using up 1.98 right now with what we're doing on Zoom, me talking here. So I can pretty much guarantee that my computer would be suffering pretty bad right now if I'd only had 2 gigs. We also can see from here that I probably have about 8 gigs, and I'm only using a quarter of the resources. Same thing with the CPU. But this would be a good way to find out if a particular piece of software or maybe hardware you were having was taking up more resources of your computer than you had to give out. I think that's pretty much all I had for Task Manager. Okay. There's one other thing that I wanted to show you all before I finished up. So let's throw all of this together, the run box and into your workflow. Okay, so how would I maybe use that? Let's say you had an error pop up on your screen and the tech guy said, take a screenshot of it for me. And we might have covered this at one point or another. So how would you go about taking a screenshot? What I would recommend you do is you follow these steps. On your keyboard in front of you, you should see a button in the upper right called Print Screen. When I tap this, it doesn't seem like it does anything, but it actually does. It saves a copy of my entire screen to a virtual clipboard that you can't see. So it's going to take that image and hold it in memory to do something else with. So I've hit Print Screen, and right now I have a copy in my virtual clipboard of my screen. So now I need to do something with it. A good way to deal with that is to open it in Microsoft Paint. So I hit Print Screen, I open the run box, I type in MS Paint, and I hit Control V. So in those very simple steps, without ever touching my keyboard, I now have a picture of my desktop that I could crop if I needed to. Whoops, no, not resize, crop. I could resize, and then more importantly, I could save it as a JPEG or a PNG. I say that that's important because let's say you took a screenshot in Microsoft Office and you mailed it to Dan, and Dan checked it on his phone and he had to open it, and it was a Word document because you pasted it into a Word document. Well, a lot of people on their phones don't have Microsoft Office, so they can't open up the Word document. However, if you open it in Paint and save it as a PNG or a JPEG, and then attach that image to your email to me or your ticket, I'm going to be able to open that picture file up no matter where I'm at, as long as I'm on a computer or tablet or mobile device. So that's why I really like it when people make screenshots this way. I want to cover that one more time because it only takes a second. On my keyboard, I hit Print Screen. I open a run box, hitting the Windows and R key. I type in MS Paint, not MS Paint, and I hit Control V for paste. Again, I never had to touch the mouse. I could do Control S for save at this point. Again, I went through that whole process, can get really fast at it, and it takes all the stress out of it. My other, oh yeah, there you go, Control V, looking at the chat menu. The other workflow I want to show you is the notepad one more time. So I think I used an example somewhere in this course about what happens when your ILS goes down and you have a policy that allows you to continue to check out resources, but you need to take record of that. I've seen libraries where they write the barcode of the patron down, or maybe worse, they write down the patron's name and hopefully can remember it's the right one later. And then they write down manually the barcode of every piece of material that they put out for loan. So what I would suggest to you is you find out that your ILS Koha is down. I want you to open a run box, Windows R, type Notepad, and then use the barcode scanner that's connected to your computer, just like you would with Koha, and start scanning those materials. You might scan the barcode of the patron, so it would come in like this, and then say, maybe go ahead and add, that's Connie, and then underneath here, we're gonna scan, 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 and then when the ILS comes back up, all I have to do is highlight, Control-C, and then do the Control-V into the browser. It's gonna be much faster that way, especially over having to write it all out by hand. So make sure that you're aware that you can use that barcode scanner outside. It's just like a keyboard. It can be used outside of Koha and any other program, and Notepad's an easy one to use it. But yeah, great fast tool to open up. Notepad opens up super fast, especially compared to Word. So get used to at least MS Paint, Notepad, and Control from Runbox. All right. Let's see here, almost done. Had a few more things that I wanted to talk about. The last part is being safe on your Windows computer. And by that, I mean, let's make sure that we're backing up all of our data on our computer as much as possible. You might be doing that to the cloud with a data storage solution like Dropbox. I just want to make sure that you're familiar with Resilio, that's R-E-S-I-L-I-O, Sync, S-Y-N-C. That's a piece of software that allows people to share their data with another machine. It'll just copy it via the BitTorrent protocol onto another machine. So if I have 8 users at the Nichols office, and I want to make sure that all their data is backing up to one computer, our file server, I can use this software from Resilio called Sync to back up all their personal desktop and documents data to the file server. And then I'm going to back up the file server like we do here to our Crash Plan Premium account. It's a piece of software from Code, or a service from a company called Code 42. And this, for $9 or $10 a month, basically, we can back up that one server that we used Sync to get all the information onto. And we're going to back up that one server to the cloud so we don't lose any data. So I just wanted to hit that note home that, you know, let's be backing up our software as much as possible. It used to be that we would just back things up to a flash drive or a hard drive. Know that those things can become corrupted. When we're backing up to the cloud, we know that that information is still going to be there. So I highly recommend that you come up with a cloud backup solution, and we would be happy to work with you to come up with that for your library. Finally, final note. I just want to talk about trusted resources on the web. Where do you go besides a Google search to find out tech information? I would highly recommend a site called Major Geeks. I would also, Robin, if you could type these in just real fast. So Major Geeks is a pretty trusted resource for information, especially on Windows computers. The next one I would suggest is How to Geek. I believe that's howtogeek.com. And then finally, Bleeping Computer. So those three, Major Geeks, How to Geek, and Bleeping Computer, are some resources for actually working with the computer. There's a lot of other sites out there that might talk about new great technology, but these sites really talk more about how to fix a certain problem. So if you see them come up in a Google search result when you're trying to fix a problem, I would feel pretty confident with those sites. I would really beware these days of sites like CNET and their other site, download.com. The problem with that site is over the years, it's become more likely to give you adware or spam that you really don't need. So let's stay away from toolbars and coupon toolbars, things that we don't need. Stay away from CNET and download.com. Trust those sites. There's one other site that I'll mention to you before we're done today, and I'll type it in. So let's say you needed some tech support, but you're like, I can't really ask Dan. Maybe it was for your home computer or something like that. Just be aware of on Reddit, which you might be familiar with, which has forums. There is a subreddit, and that's the address, for tech support. So you can post questions to that site and have a lot of people getting answers to you. Not so much important when you're here in the library system because, you can always call me and I'll be happy to work with you. But let's say your aunt has a computer problem and it's not work related. Feel free to check that out and you'll get a few other people looking at your problem for you. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility for another resource. Okay, so all we have left for you to do this week is a quiz. It's going to be a little bit about keyboard shortcuts, a little bit about those third-party and built-in tools, and that's a little bit of troubleshooting, which pretty much is third-party tools. So feel free to jump through that quiz. I think it's about 14 or so questions, so it won't be as bad as the first module. I do promise you that. It should be no more than an hour for you. So anything else anybody has here for us before we end? Okay. Our internet is slow. Ah, yes, Janice asked this earlier. Okay, Janice, I was like, ask this later. So we keep on talking about the cloud, and I just wanted to stop and mention what we're talking about there. So when we save things to the cloud, obviously we're not talking about saving it locally. It is a remote server somewhere that we don't own. But as I was telling the ladies in Baser, it's not only remote servers, but it's also usually a combination of servers. So your data doesn't live in one little place somewhere. It's not just one guy at his house has a server that he holds it to the cloud. So that piece of information is being saved lots of different places on remote servers. And that means no matter what crashes out there, it's going to be available. Now, with that said, it should always be encrypted, which, if we're dealing with reputable sources, that shouldn't be a problem. Helen, there was not a recorded Zoom meeting last week. All I did is mention to people to go ahead and take that class that we were talking about Office training. Yes, Connie, I would definitely back up your information to Dropbox for starters, or Google Drive. At least those are somewhere. If God forbid the Richmond library burned down, you would still have that information somewhere. Or if you just lost the flash drive. So definitely look at a free backup solution if it's just a few files that you want to back up. Something like Dropbox is free for up to 5 gigs. If you have a lot of information, you really should be looking at something like that Crash Plan. That's going to allow you to do unlimited amount of data being backed up. So I would highly recommend that as well. But yeah, saving to just a hard drive these days, or again, that flash drive could easily become corruptible. So even if you have a couple of hard drives that you're carrying around with you, one at home, there's still nothing to say that thing's not going to just bust on you. So a cloud solution is really, really the way to go, it seems like. Okay, I just want to make sure Kyle's mentioned his internet. That's true, remote backups, I could see that. The good thing is that a lot of these cloud backup solutions are incremental. So rather than having to replace everything, it only looks for information that has been changed. In fact, I think most of them will allow you to basically just the changes that you've made. So if I had a bunch of documents, it's really going to look for only the ones that have had changes. So that really will help on the bandwidth problems that you're seeing.
One of the things I've done is I do a full backup on the weekends, and then an incremental backup, which is what Dan's talking about, just the things that have changed on the regular week. And so sometimes if you want to get that full backup occasionally, but you don't need to do that every night. You can do it once a month or every weekend or however, so that generally we do it overnight. So that helps. But yeah, that first time can be kind of challenging. So.
Okay, well, I think that's all I have. So good luck with your quiz. Next week is the week that we meet on Tuesday because we all, or at least most of us, I think. Sorry, I shouldn't say all of us. I get a 3-day weekend. So I'm looking forward to that. So we will see you on the last week of class, which will be our network training class. I believe this is probably the last quiz because next week's assignment is to create a document network overview or diagram. I believe is going to be the main thing next week. Maybe we'll do a short troubleshooting quiz for networks, but pretty much you are through the thick of it all. So thank you for sticking with it this far. Everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you all later.